This video was brought to you by Nebula. So, following months of escalating scandal, as we outlined in our video this weekend, Boris Johnson was forced to resign a couple of weeks ago. Suddenly, then the Conservatives were without a leader, and the country needed a new Prime Minister. So, within days, the leadership race began, seeking someone to replace Johnson. We're now a week into that leadership contest, and maybe it's just the warm weather, but it's been pretty confusing. So let's recap what's going on and who's most likely to be our next Prime Minister. So in this video, we're going to run through the next few days, but obviously there's more to come. So if you want to stay in the loop, we're hosting live streams for all the upcoming votes. Get our analysis and find out the results live with us by watching along. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to be notified when we go live. Anyway, the leadership contest started in earnest last Monday. By Monday evening, anyone who wanted to be considered for the race had to officially put their name forward, along with the names of at least 20 Conservative MPs who backed them. 8 candidates achieved this: Sunak, Mordaunt, Truss, Badenoch, Tugendhat, Braverman, Zahawi and Hunt. So, with our candidate list locked down, the voting could begin. And on Wednesday, Conservative MPs cast their votes for their favourite candidate, and anyone who failed to pick up at least 30 votes would be eliminated. Unfortunately for Jeremy Hunt and Nadhim Zahawi, they only picked up 25 and 18 votes, resulting in them being kicked out of the race at the first real hurdle. The next day, MPs voted again. Again, they picked their favourite, with Hunt and Zahawi supporters now free to pick their second favourites, with Hunt encouraging his backers to plump for Sunak in this second round. Notably, Zahawi said he wouldn't be backing another candidate, maybe because he doesn't know who is going to win and therefore doesn't want to back a loser. Anyway, it wasn't just Hunt and Zahawi's backers who picked new favourites. Both Braverman and Tugendhat saw their support drop in this second round, implying that some of their supporters had been alarmed by their poor performance in round 1 and had opted to jump ship. As a result, Braverman's support dropped below 30, as well as being the lowest scoring candidate, both triggers for her to be removed from the contest. Now, due to the 1922 committee's schedule, there wouldn't be another vote until Monday, which meant we were heading into what one Conservative MP was quoted as calling the big realignment weekend. Now, this might be a slightly weird name, better suited for a chiropractic retreat. They certainly weren't wrong. MPs now had a few days to reconsider their support. They had more data, more insight, and perhaps most crucially, they had the TV debates. That's because the weekend featured 2 live TV debates, where each of the 5 remaining candidates got the opportunity to paint out their vision for the future and differentiate themselves from the rest of the pack. Now, before we dive into the details of the debate, I probably ought to explain who the remaining contenders are. I know most of you have already seen our great video on the topic, right? But for everybody else, just give me 20 seconds on each candidate. Let's start with the bookie's favourite, Rishi Sunak. Former Chancellor Sunak is likely the best known candidate, having rolled out a number of broadly positive initiatives during COVID. He's also a Brexit supporter, which will help his chances. However, his resignation did spark Johnson's downfall, and his tough fiscal policies doesn't gel well with those who support big tax cuts. Penny Mordaunt is the Minister for Trade, having previously served in a number of other departments and in the Royal Navy. She may have been pro-Brexit, but she's been attacked for her wokeness, with Mordaunt previously fairly supportive of LGBTQ+ people, before turning her back on trans people since the campaign began. Next up, Liz Truss, who may have been a Remainer, but since the referendum, she's been pro-Brexit, even penning many trade deals. She's also the current Foreign Secretary, handling issues like the war in Ukraine. She's to the right of the previous 2, though, with more right-leaning cultural and financial policies, including constant promises for tax cuts. Kemi Badenoch might just be the most right-leaning candidate, though, as a self-professed warrior against woke, most notably standing up against critical race theory and transgender rights. She's also a strong Brexiteer, which means she's seen as a bold candidate amongst the right, although without the experience of Truss. Finally, there's Tom Tugendhat. While he's had no ministerial experience, he does have a military history before becoming the chair of the influential Foreign Affairs Committee. He might have been a Remainer, which won't help him with the Tories, but he sells himself as a fresh start for the Tories, someone unsullied by the Johnson government. OK, so now we have that cleared up, how did the debates go? Well, the first was on Channel 4, and here are some of the highlights.
One question, yes or no, is Boris Johnson honest?
Sometimes. There have been some really severe issues, and I think that he has paid a price for that.
There were a number of reasons that I resigned, but trust and honesty was part of that.
He has been very clear himself that he made mistakes in government, but he had a huge range of achievement.
Boris Johnson, an honest man.
Yes, and you know what? When the NHS needed the resources to tackle these unbelievable backlogs to reform social care, I did a difficult thing to make sure that the NHS got the money it needed, and you voted against it.
To be fair to you, Rishi, what we did is we had a long conversation about it, and you set out your position, and I asked why on earth this was going to be necessary, and you told me because the boss wanted it. Now, the reality is...
COVID is a 1 in 100-year event. We need to pay for it over the long term. I think it's wrong that ordinary people are bearing the brunt of all of that cost of COVID so soon.
No such thing as COVID debt. Debt is debt. And the answer to too much borrowing can't be yet more borrowing. It's as simple as that. The most pressing economic priority for the new Prime Minister and the new government is to grip inflation.
We have inflation because of our monetary policy, that we haven't been tough enough.
But borrowing your way out of inflation isn't a plan, it's a fairy tale.
I've not done what other candidates have done and said that I will reduce a load of taxes.
Penny, I thought you said you hadn't promised tax cuts, Michelle. I thought you had said that there should be a dramatic reduction in VAT on petrol now.
I'm slightly surprised because I was the only one who didn't vote for the rise in national insurance, and it now seems everybody agrees with me.
So what was the result of the first debate? Well, fortunately, the polling firm Opinion, no, I'm not pronouncing it wrong, asked voters who they thought had won. And, well, despite a fairly poor showing in the initial rounds of the contest, Tom Tugendhat came out on top, well ahead of Mordaunt and Badenoch, and absolutely smoking Truss. Now, Truss did perform slightly better with Tory voters polled, but Tugendhat did still just about lead the race. Why did he perform so well? Partly his statements on Boris Johnson will have helped. It was clear from all the candidates that there's a real appetite to distance themselves from Johnson's government, with even formerly close allies attempting to draw a line and admitting he's not totally honest. Tugendhat was willing to go further though, and earned applause for bluntly saying the Prime Minister wasn't honest. To dig a little deeper into Tugendhat's success, we spoke to Ben Howlett, former Conservative MP and member of Theresa May's successful leadership bid in 2016, to hear what he thought.
I think he's come across incredibly well. He's by far the best orator out of all of them. If I'm being fair on the other candidates, of course, you can end up getting out some killer lines because you're acting as the opposition in that room. You're sort of trying to be the Nick Clegg in the 2010 election, if you remember. No one has ever heard of you before, so come out, and of course you're going to end up winning over the public.
Sunak also scored well, likely thanks in part due to his attitude towards the economy. Sunak was clearly trying to pitch himself as a tax realist, taking on Truss and Tugendhat directly and having a real chance to illustrate his prowess and experience in this area, something the others clearly lack. Even during this combative exchange though, Tugendhat came out with applause. Sunak might have looked technically more proficient, but Tugendhat was able to come across as genuine and trustworthy, sniping at the other candidates for their seemingly hypocritical approach to national insurance hikes. Team Tugendhat were likely feeling buoyed heading into the second debate, hosted by ITV on Sunday night.
Rishi, you have raised taxes to the highest level in 70 years. That is not going to drive economic growth because we could have afforded to fund the NHS through general taxation.
I'd love to stand here and say, look, I'll cut this tax, that tax, and another tax, and it will all be okay. But you know what? It won't. There's a cost to these things. The cost of higher inflation, higher mortgage rates. This something the nothing economics isn't conservative, it's socialism.
Okay,
but Penny, you're generally proposing that we borrow to fund our day-to-day spending, putting those bills on a credit card. Literally, Jeremy Corbyn didn't think that was the right approach.
He's got this great plan for growth. Why haven't we seen it in his last 2.5 years at the Treasury?
Look, I'll leave Rishi to answer his own record, because I'm finding it very difficult to understand who's disowning and who's defending the record of the last few years that they've been in government. It's pretty confusing to me anyway.
even Keir Starmer is attacking leadership candidates for peddling the fantasy economics of unfunded promises. If we're not for sound money, what is the point in the Conservative Party?
If he wished to serve, who here would be happy to have Boris Johnson in their cabinet? Please raise your hands.
I think this whole thing is unedifying. And I would just say to all four of my other colleagues and candidates here, I know why this is being done. But what I would say to you is that all attempts to paint me as an out-of-touch individual will fail. I'm the only person on this stage that has won and fought a Labour seat.
I believe in the Ronald Reagan dictum that you shouldn't speak ill of a fellow Conservative.
Some of your
A war in
supporters
Europe,
have, Liz Truss.
I certainly don't believe in that kind of campaign. I'm fighting a positive campaign. I'm very clear with people in my campaign that we should be focusing on the core issue which is facing Britain.
First campaign meeting I had in this contest, I said to my team, we are going to campaign as we're going to govern. And people want a break with the toxic politics of the past.
My question is for Liz, actually. And Liz, in your past, you've been both a Liberal Democrat and a Remainer. I was just wondering which one you regretted most.
I am somebody who was not born into the Conservative Party. I went to school in Paisley and Leeds. I went to a comprehensive school. My parents were left-wing activists, and I've been on a political journey ever since. But my fundamental belief, and the reason I am a Conservative, is I saw kids at my school being let down in Leeds. I saw them not get the opportunities, not get the proper educational standards that you might have got at your school, Rishi. I saw them having wasted potential, and I thought that waste was wrong.
So, who did the best in round two? Well, this time it was Sunak who scored the top spot, with former favourite Tugendhat coming in fairly close second and Badenoch slipping into last place. Interestingly though, this time Tugendhat came in last place among Tory voters, falling from first to worst in one debate, despite being joint most popular among Labour voters. The real story though were the interactions between Truss and Sunak. One particularly brutal back and forth saw Sunak hitting Truss for her record as a Lib Dem and a Remainer, and Truss swinging back at Sunak's privilege and wealth. Now, I do have to be a pedant and point out that Truss was actually almost entirely educated under Conservative governments, which implies that her peers were being let down by a Tory government, and thus, well, it just doesn't really make any sense. But regardless, this exchange illustrates that the real loser in this debate may have been the Conservative Party as a whole. The first debate was a little less bruising, but this one saw even more blue-on-blue fighting. Now, while some reports suggest that Labour were happy with this conflict and hoped it would hurt the Tories heading into the general election, this might be a little optimistic from them. After all, memory rarely extends quite that long. However, there seems to be some credence behind the concern, and yesterday morning it was announced that both Sunak and Truss had pulled out of the final debate, with the Times' Stephen Swinford reporting that both turned to each other at the end of the debate, asking, "Why are we doing this?" With those two out, Sky announced that the debate would be called off. So it seems the fighting might be over for the moment.
Watching candidates fight like cats in a sack and then see them come back together again afterwards, I think has been a deeply damaging exercise for the Conservative Party. Great telly, terrible for the Conservative Party's unity.
Anyway, with these two debates done, we were hurtling towards the third round of voting. Just a reminder, the candidate with the least votes here is eliminated from the contest. The results went as follows.
Badenoch, 58. Mordaunt, 82. Sunak, 115. Truss, 71. Tugendhat, 31. So Tom Tugendhat is eliminated from the election.
It seems that despite strong performances in the debate, especially with crucial swing voters, the Conservative base were unfazed and unimpressed by Tugendhat. With only 31 votes, Tugendhat lost another vote and fell into last place, resulting in his elimination from the process. So we asked Ben why MPs didn't plump for Tugendhat despite his strong performance with the electorate. If his moderate approach meant he was ruled out by a more right-wing MP base.
Did it not really matter how well he performed? Fundamentally, he was just ideologically not going to win.
Yeah, similar to the point on Kemi Badenoch. He's not been in government before, not been in government for a long time. So, they are selecting a prime minister, they're not selecting a leader of the oppositions, which is why I think they haven't taken a punt on Tom this time around. I think the person that really lost out to Tom's oratory skills was Jeremy Hunt when he left at the very, very beginning, if we can remember all those years back to the couple of days ago when he ended up coming out first. You know, Tom has got a long way to go in terms of his political career. And I think he's one to watch in the future as the standard bearer of the sort of sensible wing of the Conservative Party, but it's just not yet.
There's more on the way, but if you want to watch the rest of this interview, the full half-hour discussion is on Nebula, where you'll also find our interview with Chris Curtis, head of political polling at Opinium, the polling company we've referenced throughout this video. Now, if you're not already a Nebula subscriber, it's all good. You can sign up for about £1 a month if you use the Nebula Curiosity Stream bundle deal. I'll keep this quick, but essentially signing up to Curiosity Stream using the link in the description not only gets you all the documentaries on their superb streaming service, but also Nebula, our streaming service, where you can watch our exclusive videos and all our content ad-free. Anyway, what about the other candidates though? Well, Sunak maintained his lead with 115 votes, up 14, giving him the biggest increase of the night, with Badenoch up 9, Truss up 7, and Mordaunt down 1. So what does this all tell us? Well, it seems that Braverman's voters primarily did stay in the more anti-woke right, with them broadly heading towards Truss and Badenoch. This leaves Mordaunt pretty vulnerable. Losing one vote isn't the end of the world, but races like this are about momentum, and if one of Truss or Badenoch were to be eliminated tomorrow, their vote could coalesce, with combined votes pushing either one of them over the line and into the final with Sunak. That being said, it'll be interesting to see tomorrow which way Tugendhat's votes end up going. Even Sunak hasn't quite met the 120 votes needed to secure a place in the final two. But with Tugendhat more aligned with Sunak and Mordaunt, we could see a bump for these two tomorrow. Anyway, you're now fully up to date. With 3 rounds and 2 debates complete, we now have 4 more candidates heading into the 4th round. Who will win? Well, you'll have to tune in to our live stream at 1:15 PM to find out our thoughts and see the results for yourself. As always, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to be notified when the stream begins. Or, set a timer? I don't know, just ring the bell because that feels easier to me.